Hi, my name is Anita Diaz, and this is my presentation, The Problem with Plastic, Exploring Sustainable Food Packaging Alternatives. Today, I'm going to talk about the problem with plastic, what packaging alternatives we have, and how to reduce and reuse plastic before you recycle it, and why that's important. So first, what is the problem with plastic? Well, the problem is that plastic is everywhere. It's in our cups and bottles, plastic silverware, it's in our food packaging, our toothbrushes, and even places we don't think about, like our clothes and baby diapers, supplements, our tea bags, tires, contact lenses. It's truly everywhere. And that makes it problematic because when we think about trying to reduce plastic production, there's a lot of areas that are affected by that. And so there's a lot of change that would need to happen, and that makes it a little bit problematic. In 2018, 35.7 million tons of plastic was produced, and that was just in the United States alone. So that's a lot of plastic being produced. And if that amount is produced every year, that's an even more significant amount of plastic. Plastic contributes to 12% of all municipal solid waste, and 18% of all municipal solid waste sent to landfills is plastic. That is second only to paper and paperboard. When you think about it, plastic being the number two thing that is wasted, it really shows you how much plastic we're using, and especially how much single-use plastic we are using. So 14.5 million tons of plastic in 2018 was specifically single-use food packaging plastic. And so this would be like your takeout containers and your takeout forks and to-go cups and things of that nature. That was almost 15 million tons of plastic. So that's quite a lot. And single use plastic is really what I'm going to be focusing on today when we talk about alternatives and how to reduce and reuse before you recycle. Why do we use plastic in the first place? Well, it's inexpensive and manufacturers like things that are affordable. It's also lightweight when you compare it to something like glass or metal. Durable, and there's lots of different plastic materials that you can use to make your product the durability that you need it. It has a lot of versatile functional properties, so it can be made into lots of different shapes and sizes. And lastly, it's used for convenience. It's really a part of our lifestyle now to be able to go through a drive-through and get a coffee in a plastic cup, or go to the grocery store and grab a granola bar that's in a plastic wrapping. And we don't really want to give up on our convenience. So that's why we continue to use it. What are the downsides of single-use plastic? The first is the environmental downsides. Not only is plastic very, very resource intensive to create, it requires a lot of energy and a lot of fossil fuels, but plastic is also not biodegradable. So it sticks around in the environment, in our landfills, and our oceans for anywhere from tens to hundreds of years. And even when it does break down, it breaks down into something called microplastics. So, microplastics are these teeny, teeny, tiny pieces of plastic. They're less than 5 millimeters in length. And these components that plastic breaks down into can end up in our waterways, in our water supply, and they can end up harming our aquatic ocean life. And so then not only are we consuming those plastics in the drinking water, but we're also consuming it through our fish or our foods that we're getting that are eating the fish. And additionally, the chemicals that are used to make plastic can also leach into food sometimes. So The packaging is contributing to, these chemicals getting into our food and beverages that we're eating. And the last downside that I'm going to talk about today is recycling. So, a very, very small amount of plastic actually gets recycled, and only 9% of all of the plastic ever produced has been recycled. So, think back to that 35.7 million tons of plastic produced in 2018, and think about that plastic produced year after year and the number growing even more. And such a small amount of that is getting recycled. So, where is it all ending up? It's ending up in our landfills, and it's not biodegrading, so it's not going anywhere. That's why this is a problem, why single use plastic is a problem. And on top of that, people are not really taught how to properly recycle. And that creates a lot of problems for the recycling facilities. It's really difficult for them to be able to recycle the plastic when they get plastic that's been contaminated with food, or they've collected plastic that is not supposed to be recycled in curbside bins. And so there's a lot of education that needs to take place around recycling practices if we want to be able to use recycling as a method to improve the sustainability of single use plastic. So, here are some of the chemicals that I briefly mentioned can be problematic when they leach into your food and beverages that are stored in plastic. And all of these are known as what's called endocrine disruptors. So, these chemicals can interfere with your body's natural hormones, and sometimes they can even mimic your hormones and make your body think that they are a certain hormone. And that's really problematic when your body is trying to use that for all the functions that it uses your hormones for. So, the first you've probably heard of, this is bisphenols, and the one you're most likely familiar with would be BPA, that's bisphenol A. This is found in a lot of plastics, such as water bottles, even baby bottles. It's commonly used as a lining in metal cans to protect leaching of the metal. And so you might have seen your canned goods say that they're in a BPA free can. But BPA doesn't necessarily mean all bisphenols. And so if you're interested in reducing your exposure to bisphenols, you may want to do some research into companies and find out if they are using completely bisphenol free products or just BPA free. The next one is phthalates. And phthalates are found in not only food packaging, but they're also found in personal care products, and they can improve the texture and stability of those products. So phthalates are problematic because they can increase leaching when they're exposed to heat. So think of your Chinese takeout container and you had leftovers that you popped in the microwave the next day. That's exposure to heat. And so if that container was made with phthalates, then there's a potential for the phthalates to leach into the food after that heat exposure. And the last chemical that I'm going to talk about are PFAS. So these are what are known as forever chemicals because they take so long to break down that they virtually never leave our environment. They just stick around for hundreds of years. And so these are found in lots of things from nonstick and heat resistant cookware, food packaging. They're even found in clothing, so especially workout clothing, clothing that is sweat wicking or moisture resistant. They can use PFAS to give the clothing that property. And so you're wearing clothes every day. You cook almost every day, most likely. And we already know that heat can increase the leaching potential for some chemicals. And so, if you want to look into ways to reduce your PFAS exposure, we will include some resources a website that lists products that are free of PFAS. So, we talked about plastic and the problems with it. And so now we can talk about what alternatives we have to plastic. So we have glass. Glass is a very functional alternative. It's very easy to reuse, but it's also very bulky and it can be heavy and it's very fragile. And so, unlike plastic that's durable and lightweight, it's easy to ship. Glass is not so easy and it's also more expensive to ship. So, this kind of deters a lot of manufacturers from wanting to use glass. We also have metal, which is another durable, functional option, but metal is still energy intensive to produce. And so, if we're looking to reduce our use of resources, metal still is a resource intensive product. We also have paper. Paper is very low cost. It's already common to see maybe paper cups or paper bags or paper plates. But again, just like metal, paper is still energy intensive to produce. And lastly, we have bio based plastic. So these are plastics that are made either from plants or from microorganisms. And these are made from renewable sources of energy as opposed to fossil fuels, but they're not perfect because they do require a lot of inputs. So these are the four main alternatives that we have. So here are the benefits and downsides of glass. Again, um, it's great for protection and insulation. It's easy to reuse. It is relatively affordable, but like I said, it's fragile and it costs a lot to ship because it's bulky and it has a lot more weight than plastic. So it's not desirable by manufacturers to use glass. We also have metal. Um, like plastic, metal is lightweight and durable. It's also recyclable, but it is resource intensive and it often requires a metal lining to protect against corrosion, especially for acidic foods. It can corrode the metal and then that can leach into the food. So that's often when they use the BPA lining. And so that's a downside to metal. Paper and cardboard. This is an inexpensive option that manufacturers do turn to. It can be reusable and biodegradable, but it is difficult to recycle, especially when it's contaminated by food. So, if you get a donut in a paper bag and there's some grease left on the paper bag, that's not so easy to wash off. And so that makes the recycling process a lot more difficult. And sometimes it does require the addition of a plastic coating or lining for further protection or durability. And then we have our bio based and biodegradable. So, like we said, this is great that they are made from renewable resources like corn or soy, but that does mean that you have to farm a lot more corn and soy to be able to have the inputs for that product. And another thing is, a lot of these bio based options will say that they're biodegradable, but they're really only biodegradable under certain conditions. And so, if those conditions are not met, let's say it doesn't get recycled and it ends up in the landfill, um, if the right conditions aren't met, it's not going to biodegrade. And so, that is something to consider when looking at these types of plastics as an alternative. So these are two types of bioplastic alternatives. You have polylactic acid, also known as PLA, and this is plastic that has been made from the sugars from corn or sugarcane or other plant materials. And then you have polyhydroxy alkylenate or PHA. And this is a bioplastic that is produced by microorganisms. So these microorganisms consume organic matter of sorts and they produce byproducts that can then be used to turn into plastic. So these are some things to consider when we're talking about bioplastics. They're not a perfect solution. We did talk about how bioplastics do reduce the use of fossil fuels because they're made from renewable sources like plants. And bioplastic production does reduce greenhouse gas emissions when compared to traditional production. And it allows us to maintain that convenience factor. We can still go to our favorite coffee shop and grab a cup of coffee to go. Um, we just maybe have a different kind of plastic. We have a compostable cup instead of a non compostable cup, and we still get that convenience. On the other hand, because these plastics are produced from plants, we're going to need a lot more land and water to grow these plants. And also, it's going to increase the chemical use. There's going to be chemical use on the plants from pesticides and herbicides and those things that are used when the plants are grown. And there's also chemicals required in order to convert those plants the um, into the plastic. And we've already talked about how these plastics require certain conditions in order to be biodegradable or compostable. And this might mean that there's some more burden placed on the consumer because it's up to the consumer to make sure that that plastic ends up in the right place as opposed to just ending up in the garbage can and going to the landfill. And of course, these plastics are more expensive than fossil fuel plastics. So that's something that manufacturers have to consider and something that consumers will need to consider if that price is passed down to them um, because of production costs increasing. So here are some other innovative ideas that are trying to really improve the sustainability of plastic. So, full cycle bioplastics in California is making PLA plastic, but instead of having to grow new crops to produce this PLA, they're trying to make it from things that were already going to be wasted. So, food waste, crop residue, garden waste, unrecycled paper, and cardboard. And their PLA is compostable and it's actually marine degradable. So if it does end up in the ocean, it's not going to harm the marine life, which is awesome. And then we have Mango Materials in Stanford University. They're working together to research a process to use methane gas from wastewater treatment plants to create that PHA. So that's the plastic that's made from microorganisms. And when this PHA is degraded, it turns back into methane. And similarly to the marine degradable full cycle bioplastics, this methane can be naturally digested by microorganisms. So if the plastic does end up in the ocean, it's not going to harm the marine life, which is goes back to that toxicity factor of single-use plastics. And lastly, we have San Diego State University. A colleague of mine there did research on creating biodegradable whey protein isolate films and how those can be strengthened by biosynthesized zinc oxide nanoparticles. So the protein films by themselves lack mechanical properties that make them desirable, but when they're strengthened by nanoparticles, they have a lot more strength and utility. However, these nanoparticles can be very energy intensive to produce, and they can sometimes require toxic chemicals to produce them. So, her research looked at how to biosynthesize those nanoparticles using the whey protein, and they were able to create those particles in a non toxic and eco friendly way and successfully create that biodegradable film. So, these are just a few of the innovative ideas that are around. There are so many companies doing so much research to create these plastic alternatives, and they're doing really amazing, awesome things. So, lastly, we're going to talk about how to reduce and reuse plastic before you recycle and why that is important to do. So, this is the EPA's waste management hierarchy. This is the ideal solution for waste management, if you will. And so, you can see at the bottom is treatment and disposal. That's least preferred. And it goes all the way up to recycling and composting. And then the most preferred is source reduction and reuse. So, we want to eliminate the amount of waste that's being produced. That's the ideal solution. But we can also reuse instead of sending things to disposal. And then we're really keeping things out of landfills and keeping things from being completely wasted. So, California is doing really great things with legislature to try to reduce this effect of single use plastic. So, these are a couple legislative acts that have been placed. SB 54 is requiring 100% of packaging to be recyclable or compostable by 2032, so less than 10 years from now. And SB 270 placed a ban on single use carryout bags. So, California is really leading the way for the rest of the United States with their legislature on single use plastic. And UC, University of California institutions are also leading the way on sustainability. All University of California institutions have this zero waste policy. And these are the things that they're targeting. So they're targeting eliminating single use plastic bags, replacing single use foodware with reusable foodware at on campus dining facilities, phasing out single use plastic beverage bottles, and selecting, giving preference to locally recyclable and or compostable packaging for prepackaged items, so like chips and cookies and things of that nature that are sold on campus, giving preference to any items that have that packaging that's locally recyclable or compostable. So these are really, really wonderful policies, and we definitely want to support these policies in not only UC institutions, but it would be great if these were policies that could be at colleges everywhere. So I want to go over just some of the ways that you can go about reducing your single use plastic consumption. And really, the best way for you to do this would be to take a mindful inventory of all of your daily lifestyle habits and routines and think about where you might be using plastic already and consider ways that you could maybe reduce the amount of plastic that you're using or make a swap that would eliminate plastic use, that would still allow you to do your daily habits and routines just in a more sustainable way. So, the first idea, you can reuse your Ziploc bags. Either just wash them out quickly after, if you just take a sandwich to work, you can give it a little rinse and dry it and use it the next day. Or you could even eliminate plastic bags by taking your sandwich in some kind of reusable container. You could also reduce your use of plastic wrap by investing in something like beeswax wraps or other alternatives. There's silicone wraps on the market. You can also just, if you have a bowl of leftovers, you can just pop a little plate on top and that keeps it protected. If you don't already have some, you can invest in glass or metal food containers, or you could reuse what you already have. So, one of my favorite things to do is just wash and reuse glass containers. Like if I get a jar of pasta, I like to just wash that jar out and keep it. You can also make minimal packaging purchases or opt for more sustainable packaging options. So, if it fits within your budget to buy an item that has recyclable or compostable packaging, you can do that. Or you could just make minimal packaging purchases. So, not buying things that are individually wrapped if they don't have to be, or maybe, instead of buying 1 pound of rice every week for 5 weeks, if you have the budget, maybe buy a 5 pound bag of rice once in 5 weeks, and then you only have one bag of plastic versus 5 individual bags. BYOB, bring your own bags. I'm sure many of us have already done this. Swapping your plastic coffee pods for a reusable pod, or even your coffee filters for a reusable cloth or metal filter. So, if you just do a search on Amazon, you can find metal pods for Keurig machines and Nespresso machines. This is also a way that you can save money. So this is a really fun swap to do, and then you can put whatever coffee you want inside the pod. Next, we have search for items secondhand. The more use an item gets, the more sustainable it is. So the longer that item's in use, the less of a carbon footprint it has. So that's a great way to shop more sustainably. Transform your old t-shirts into kitchen rags or cotton rounds. There's so many things you can do with old t-shirts that are just, you're not going to wear them anymore, but the fabric is still good. And you can cut it up and use it in place of paper towels, or you can make your own little cotton rounds and not have to buy those from the store. So that's another thing you can do. You can also swap your single-use mop pad if you have like a Swiffer or another type of mop that uses single-use pads. Swap that out for a reusable one, or you could even make your own. There's lots of DIY tutorials online for this. Explore plastic-free hygiene products. So there can be plastic in the ingredients of your hygiene products. A lot of companies are moving away from this. Um, but even if you're not looking at that, a lot of hygiene products, most hygiene products, I would say, come in plastic. And again, there's a lot of consumer demand for more sustainable packaging. So there's lots of companies that are moving towards paper packaging and glass versus plastic. So if there's any of these products that fit into your budget, those are great things to explore. Or you could also try to make your own. So online, there's tons of recipes for making your own deodorant or shampoo. And so if that's something that interests you, that could be something fun to explore. Eliminating plastic beverage bottles. This is just something to be mindful of. Of course, this is an easy way, if you can do it, to eliminate your single-use plastic use. And then swap your cleaning products for reusable bottles or making your own cleaning solution. There's lots of companies that are selling reusable bottles, and then you only have to buy the cleaning solution, or like a very concentrated portion of the solution, and then you dilute it with water to make your own. Blue Land is one company that I can think of off the top of my head, but there's so many of them. Or you can make your own cleaning solution with something like vinegar. There's lots of recipes online for that. So this is not an extensive list of things that you can do. This is just some of them. And if you take a look at your habits, you can easily do a Google search and see how you can reduce single use plastic in the ways that make sense for you. So, this is my take home message. At the end of the day, plastic is a problem, but it's not going anywhere. Plastic is here to stay, it's a part of our lifestyle. And while we as consumers may be demanding more sustainable packaging options, it's going to take a long time for us to get there. And so I don't want you to feel overwhelmed with feeling like you have to change out all of these things and you have to remove all the plastic from your lifestyle right now. That is not what I want. I want you to focus on the small things that you can do to reduce your plastic consumption and advocate for sustainable policies to improve the health of yourself, your loved ones, and your planet. So, what are the things? Maybe it's one or two of the tips that I shared right now. Maybe you do that mindful look at your day and your life and your habits, and you find something else that you could easily do. Just look for what makes sense for you and your lifestyle and how you can reduce plastic in those ways that are sustainable and achievable for you. Thank you so much for your time. I hope you are feeling motivated and inspired to reduce your use of single use plastic and explore alternative food packaging options. Thank you so much for watching.